For them, there is no difference between channels 7, 24, 30, or 65. What also concerns us then as parents is the great proliferation of non-network channel offerings which flood into our home. In March, I was asked and agreed to act as a volunteer as an expert advisor to the RAND Corporation in its proposed evaluation of the California Wellness Foundation's Violence Prevention Initiative. RAND has asked me to assist this effort by explaining how the television industry evaluates violence-related content. This initiative is one of the many sponsored by the California Wellness Foundation, which has invested about $30 million on projects designed to reduce youth violence in California. I've just completed planning our next season's programming schedule. We have met your challenge to show progress. The proof is in our programming selections. I'm prepared to discuss with you today any of these selections. I do, however, want to stress that our decisions in arranging that schedule were directly affected by our constant and growing concern for decreasing excessive violence. This vigilance is due in large part to your leadership, Chairman Simon, and NBC commends you and your committee for their work. Chairman Simon, you have challenged the entire entertainment industry to do a better job. NBC has gotten the message. We are listening. We hear you. We have been and will continue to take steps to scrutinize with even greater intensity the depiction of violence on television. You're absolutely right when you refer by analogy to a nuclear weaponry accord. All components of the entertainment industry should voluntarily take individual steps to counter the inappropriate portrayal of violence in entertainment programming. And all elements of the industry need to act to reduce such programming. The days of broadcast network dominance have gone by the way of black and white television. With programming standards, my statements would be very much the same as my counterparts at ABC and at CBS. We have written requirements which we scrutinize as to acts of violence in our programming. I know that the May sweeps has gotten widespread publicity. I ask, however, that you also consider our next season's fall schedule. These selections were made after our meetings with Chairman Simon and the adoption of the joint network standards. Attached to my testimony is the NBC television network primetime schedule, which we just announced. We are very proud of this new schedule. In particular, you should note the distinctively nonviolent content of these offerings. There are 7 new comedy programs, 2 new dramas, a weekly whodunit mystery movie, and a soap opera format. The 2 new dramas are Against the Grain, a 1-hour family drama about a coach of a high school football team in a small town outside Dallas, and Sequest, DSV, a Steven Spielberg-produced 1-hour adventure series that explores the oceanic frontier 25 years in the future aboard a Nautilus-like submarine. There will also be a new news magazine format featuring Tom Brokaw and Katie Couric. At NBC a year ago, we abandoned Saturday morning animation programming. Yes, some were action-adventure and had acts of violence. In its place, we put news programming and a teen block of live-action comedy, and we have had much praise, and we have won many awards for that teen block of programming. NBC will also actively participate in the industry-wide conference on violence in Los Angeles this summer. NBC takes affirmative and positive steps to deal with the issue of violence in our society. This fall, we launched our 4th consecutive season of the nationally recognized The More You Know public service message and community action campaign. This phase of the campaign premiered in September and focused on the issue of teenage violence, conflict, and resolution. And we were just recently awarded the George Foster Peabody Award for this campaign. We are also going to devote this fall a number of upcoming episodes and a variety of our television series to themes about anti-violence, and these will play in the early evenings, the 8 to 9 o'clock hour, so that we can affect the youth of America with these themes. I believe today, if you examine the three networks' primetime schedules, you will find that there are fewer programs that are likely to contain violent elements than there were 5 years ago. We at NBC are even more sensitive today, and I'm confident with our new program schedule, you will find there will be a further reduction of violence in our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Littlefield. Mr. Brandenburg.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the subcommittee, Senator Conrad. My name is George Vredenberg. I'm Executive Vice President of Fox, Inc., father of two, one of whom is in the hearing room this morning. I wish to thank you for inviting me here this morning to testify on behalf of the Fox Broadcasting Company, and with your permission, I would present a summary of my written testimony. As you know, Fox is the newest of our nation's over-the-air television broadcasting services, programming about 15 hours a week during prime time, with an additional 19 hours of children's programming on weekdays and on Saturday mornings. For the most part, Fox's regular primetime program schedule has not been composed of programs in which violence, however that term may be defined, has played any part. There are two Fox primetime reality programs referred to in some of the literature as violent, America's Most Wanted and Cops, which I will address specifically in a moment. First, I would like to discuss the question of violence on television more generally. This issue is my estimation complex and subtle. The use of violence on television can be efficacious and it can be entertaining, or it can be provocative, imitatable, and dangerous. Hence the need, on our part, for standards and limits, and hence the utility of ongoing and constant attention and focus, like today's hearing and like at the industry-wide August conference scheduled in Los Angeles. We at Fox try to make sure that we do not seek to sell violence, that we do not associate violence with happiness, with glamour, with good health, with societal approval. Rather, we seek to portray any antisocial violent act as unacceptable. We try to associate antisocial violent acts with real consequences for its victims and for its perpetrators. And we associate antisocial violence with wrongdoing, with punishment, and with pain. Creative people who work with our company must be open to discussion, questioning, cross-examination, and criticism when they seek to use violence as a dramatic or comedic device. For our part, our goal at Fox is to select and edit our programming to reinforce the values of our society, namely, antisocial, violent acts are socially and legally unacceptable. In order to assure that any violent acts in our programming are used only in that context, our programming and broadcast standards staffs select and review all of our programs with the same general principles as are contained in the Statement of Principles adopted by the National Association of Broadcasters and those reflected in the Joint Standards for the Depiction of Violence in Television Programs recently issued by ABC, CBS, and NBC last December. Even inside those standards, even within those standards, we at Fox, like others here, apply our guidelines very much with the thought in mind of what we would want our own children to see on TV. Now, let me turn for a second to America's Most Wanted and Cops. These two programs represent, in my view, the legitimate role that some depictions of violence can play in television programming. America's Most Wanted is a Fox television program that has been responsible for the capture of over 250 convicted felons and the recovery of over 50 missing or kidnapped persons, many of them children. Far from glamorizing violence, America's Most Wanted is explicitly dedicated to the prevention of violent crime, to showing violent crime as socially and legally unacceptable. The list of awards and honors bestowed upon America's Most Wanted host, John Walsh, is too long to recite here, but is attached to my written testimony. As Attorney General, or former Attorney General, William Barr says in his December 1992 letter, John Walsh, quote, has devoted his life to fighting against violent crime and for the rights of victims. In a similar vein, the FBI has praised America's Most Wanted as having been, quote, highly successful in leading to the apprehension of fugitives from justice. Fox Broadcasting Company has, through America's Most Wanted and the Fox family of affiliated stations, in cooperation with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, recently begun issuing missing child alerts. Under this program, when a child is criminally abducted anywhere in the United States, America's Most Wanted immediately produces a 30-second announcement containing a profile, description, and picture of the abducted child and a report of the circumstances and place of the abduction. That announcement is distributed immediately by Fox Broadcasting to its affiliated stations in the geographic area of the abduction. Those announcements can be broadcast on air within 12 hours of the abduction, and they have already been instrumental in the recovery of more than one abducted child. Fox would like to express its appreciation to you, Mr. Chairman, for your leadership in the passage of legislation establishing the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and for your continuing concern and involvement in this important area, including at next Tuesday's press conference, recognizing the 10th anniversary of National Missing Children's Day. Next Tuesday night, America's Most Wanted will air a one-hour special recreating a number of child abduction cases seeking information concerning their recovery. This program, Mr. Chairman, America's Most Wanted, has remarkably been cited by academic experts as one of the most violent programs on television. Yet, in my view, there are significant public interest benefits in this program which should not be forgotten as we work on this most difficult problem of violence on television. Another Fox program, Cops, is the ultimate in so-called reality program, as its action is all real, all immediate, no reenactments. As a real reality program, Cops hardly can be criticized for glamorizing violence. Cops follows real life law enforcement personnel as they go about their daily, dangerous job of preventing violence and apprehending those who commit violent crime. Cops clearly shows viewers the adverse consequences of antisocial violent behavior. Every episode of Cops is carefully edited by its producers and by Fox for content considered potentially shocking and for elements such as coarse language. Moreover, each episode of Cops is preceded by an advisory regarding the nature of the program. Cops, like America's Most Wanted, has been the recipient of numerous commendations from law enforcement officials and victim support groups. And Cops, like America's Most Wanted, reflects Fox's efforts to portray antisocial behavior only as socially unacceptable. In conclusion, I have not come here today to deny that television violence is a major problem and its proper use a matter of continuing, ongoing, and intense concern. We at Fox fully recognize the importance of the issue and accept the responsibility for establishing limits on the nature, extent, and context in which violence is presented. We do so with the clear objective of presenting violent acts in a context which strongly discourages antisocial behavior and which otherwise does not offend or do harm to our audience, particularly our child audience. While no doubt we have and will continue to err from time to time, we do not seek to avoid accountability. On behalf of Fox, I pledge to continue to work with my colleagues at this table and elsewhere in the affected industries, and with you, to address this important issue, and wherever possible, to improve Fox's performance in this area of such importance to our society. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
We thank you. You mentioned these last two programs that do have some violence and but yet serve a constructive cause. What time are they on?
America's Most Wanted is on at 8 o'clock and on Friday night, and Cops is on at 8 o'clock on Saturday night.
Yeah, these are hours when you have a large children's audience. I just mentioned that. It's one of the things I think we have to be sensitive to. Let me add one point I should have mentioned earlier. When I talk about violence on television, I am not talking about the news programs. I think some of the news programs do contain too much violence. But there is a dramatic difference between news violence from Bosnia, for example, and entertainment violence that frequently glamorizes violence. Let me ask all of you. You have heard Tom Shales, he's been quoted here as describing May as Murder Month. In view of what has been said here, are we going to get a repeat of May in the future as Murder Month or is that now going to be history, that type of program?
Violence is never going to go entirely away. I mean,
No, and we're not suggesting that, as you know.
all tragedy ends in death. I think Lord Byron said that. I think Tom Sales had it right, just as your methodology is right, and that is that it's very hard to, the difference is really the qualitative assessment of the programming that we do. I mean, if I was to put King Lear on the air with Cornwall taking out Gloucester's eye and stamping on it and saying, "Out vile jelly," the difference between yesterday and today would be in today's movies, you'd see the eye being taken out. On Shakespeare's stage, it was simulated. The most very violent, King Lear is very violent, Richard III is very violent, Euripides Medea is very violent. But the difference is a qualitative one. And I think the hardest part that we're all facing as networks and cable movies as well is that the sheer volume of channels is making easy choices and trashy choices more obvious. There is an assumption earlier in the panel that we actually do very well with violent movies. The most highly rated movie of last year was Sarah Plain and Tall, which was a quiet rural drama about the Midwest. They're just harder to find. We are having difficulty filling 332 channels, and we're well on the way to a 500-channel universe. If that isn't an invitation to mediocrity, I don't know what is. So the question of Shales is exactly right. We have got to do better. Now, we are doing better. The miniseries that we did, you'll be at the murder miniseries we did this week, which was not especially good and didn't get especially large audiences, we did eliminate the body count in it. There were 3 people killed, but you didn't see them being killed. We saw the shots fired. It was a reality show based on true life drama. Wasn't very good either. But it is, I would settle for 15 Sarah Plain and Talls, but the community is trying to fill these channels and channels and channels, and the stuff that we get in-house, which we are censoring more and more because we ought to, because of the pressure you've applied. It's not very easy to find quality in this vast number of channels in front of us. Doing better is very important. I think next May you'll see fewer. On this May you had fewer. I know it sounds like mayhem was all through May, but no, I've got a list of we ran 10 movies. 2 of them were violent, the rest were not. But I'm not proud of the violent ones, and I'm not proud sometimes of the quality of writing and the quality of producing. That's a lot of pressure we have to put on the community and a lot of work coming back. But I don't think we disagree with the basic premise that it's either causal or so forth. I mean, I should also point out that the dullest television in the world was on Yugoslavian television for the last 10 years, and it didn't get in the way of everybody killing each other. So it's whatever we're doing, we've just got to do it better and more thoughtfully and more reflectively. It's going to be hard, but I think the message is clear.
Senator, I'd also just like to add that we're...
Yes, if I can just comment, and Mr.
Sure.
Stringer, I gather from you, your answer to my question is, number one, we have a problem with cable, and there's no question about that. They're up next here.
I didn't separate us.
No, I
Senator.
understand,
really
but you by implication suggest that, and that probably we're going to do better next May.
No, definitely we're doing better.
Definitely do better. All right. I like that answer better. Mr. Littlefield.
Yes, Senator, I agree. We will also do better at NBC next May. I would also point out that our highest-rated movie for this May was Fried Green Tomatoes, the theatrical film, which I think is an outstanding quality film. That's not lost on us. When we had a 3-hour Bob Hope special, when we had 3 hours of the Academy of Country Music Awards, and of course, Seinfeld finale and Cheers the Last Call, these were the greatest success stories for NBC in the May sweep. But we will redouble our efforts for future sweeps periods in looking at the violence content of our programming.
Mr. Murphy?
Well, I'd like to comment about the movies we had or some of the specials. There's been some comment about Murder in the Heartland, which we showed, a miniseries, and frankly, it was an economic disaster. All the advertisers left the show because it had the violence in it. Didn't get particularly good ratings. So
I'm glad to hear both, I might add.
Yeah, and I mean, we tried to do the best job we could on it. We thought it was a good idea, obviously, at the time. But I would certainly hope that by next May that we would have less violence in our May sweeps.
Mr. Brandenburg?
Mr. Chairman, we don't have the same kind of genre yet as the three networks. So we do not have a made-for-TV movie night or movie night. We are going to start one in June with such shows as Beethoven, and Mr. Baseball, and Babe, starring John Goodman. As has been indicated by this panel, it sounds as if the marketplace may be a great regulator, and then the fact that both advertisers and the audience are getting turned off this material, you'll be able to see how we perform next May, and I'm confident that we'll perform well.
You saw the promotions earlier. But just, and I'm not asking for any definite commitment here, though I wouldn't be opposed to that, but what about the idea of not having any of these violent promotions between the hours of 7 and 9 when children are so heavily watching? Any reaction to that kind of an idea? Any of you?
Well, it's not uncommon for us to do different types of promotional pitches to the audience for our product. And I certainly think that in the afternoon programming, such as sports programming on the weekend, we can have promotion that is designed specifically at a youth audience so that it does not have depictions of violence, that we will change our formats for promotion for afternoon programming, sports programming, as well as for early evening programming. And that's something that we're certainly capable of doing, and we will.
Any reaction from the others? Mr. Stringer?
Yes, I think we're doing the same. There was a theory that the point about promotion was to let people know what was in the movie and that it would guide the parents away from the movie. But the reality is parental guidance is less forceful than it used to be, as we all know, so that I think it is therefore incumbent on us to change the nature of the programming in different time periods, and we're already beginning to do that.
Mr. Murphy?
We have one show on the new schedule, which is on Thursday night, Missing Persons, which is a cop-oriented show, but it's designed, of course, to solve problems of missing people. We don't consider it a serious violence situation. In a show like that, which is designed for adult viewing because it